The International Criminal Court has issued arrest warrants for the leaders of Israel and Hamas. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and former Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant were both subject to warrants which accuse the leaders of war crimes and crimes against humanity for their roles in the ongoing war in Gaza that has lasted over a year. The court also issued a warrant for a Hamas leader over the October 7th attack on Israel, which killed almost 1,200 people. Joining me now is the Hill's foreign policy reporter, Laura Kelly. Laura, thanks so much for coming on. You know, with these ICC warrants, it's not like they're going to go and arrest Netanyahu or likely leaders in Hamas either, but what does it mean kind of on a global scale that they have been issued in the first place?
I think immediately it will limit Netanyahu's travel and that of former Defense Minister Gallant, or it will test the countries that they may want to travel to for whether the signatories who are signatories to the ICC will act on that, an arrest warrant. If we kind of take a similar case of the arrest warrant against Russian President Vladimir Putin, he traveled to Mongolia as signatory to the ICC, and they did not arrest him there. But Putin also did not go to South Africa, which is a signatory to the ICC, so he wouldn't risk putting them in a position where they would have to arrest them, because I believe it is South Africa that brought this case against Israel. So that's the one practical measure, but on the other hand, it's a battle between the U.S., which says that Israel has the ability to investigate itself over these crimes and that shouldn't be subject to the ICC, and much of the world who thinks that Israel is not taking seriously their conduct in the war in Gaza. And
key is the U.S. is not a signatory to the ICC, so Netanyahu could still travel to the U.S. to speak to Congress or something like that. You talked about the further isolation of Israel on the international stage. With the Trump administration coming in, it strikes me that this further kind of takes Israel down the path of being just solely reliant on the U.S. for its international protection. Maybe that's not such a bad thing with the Trump administration coming in, but I think there could be an argument that this is a dangerous road to go down for Israel if it continues to kind of erode support from even its like Western European allies.
Israel is isolated in the realm of public opinion on the international stage, but in terms of its military and in terms of the relationships it has with different countries in procuring the means it needs, or even its own export of military hardware, it's not so isolated, and Israel is a rich country. Israel is viewed not necessarily as needing the protection of the United States militarily, but it is a big supporter, and the U.S. gains a lot of benefit from that. But we also face the unpredictability of President Trump. I don't think that we will see any stalling, delaying, or holding back of U.S. weapons to Israel for any reason, but we may see some different political pressures on Israel just because Trump has expressed that he doesn't like seeing Israel carry out its war in Gaza, Israel carry out its war in Lebanon, not necessarily because he's very concerned about human rights, but he views them as distraction from what he wants to achieve in the Middle East, which is a deal between Israel and Saudi Arabia and to confront Iran.
And being able to say that he brought peace to a dangerous situation would be a nice feather in Trump's cap when he comes into office. In these waning days of the Biden administration, what do you think the hopes there are for a ceasefire in both Gaza and in Lebanon?
In Gaza, I don't think we're going to see a ceasefire in name. What we may see is Israel declaring maybe an end to the war in some shape or form, but exercising security control over the territory. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu has said something the other day about he has directed his generals to make up a plan for the day after. This is something the Biden administration has been talking about for months. But because Trump has said, end this now, Netanyahu wants to get on the good side of Trump. With Lebanon, it's also unclear if Hezbollah feels that they would get a better deal with the Biden administration mediating a ceasefire with Israel. But from the reporting I've seen on Hezbollah's statements, Israel's demands, where the U.S. is, there's hope until there's not, I guess.
I want to ask you about the latest developments in Ukraine. There is this report from the Ukrainians where they're saying that the Russians have launched an ICBM for the first time, a missile that would be capable of carrying a nuclear warhead. Is that true? And what do you think that says about the potential for this escalation in the war that seems to be continuing?
I think they're still collecting information. I mean, the Ukrainians have said this, but I think it's still a little bit unclear exactly the type of missile, but definitely a different type of missile than they've introduced on the battlefield before, and one that comes at a period of heightened tensions where Russian President Vladimir Putin has said that he has changed his nuclear doctrine to respond to President Biden allowing Ukraine to use Western-provided missiles to strike deep into Russia. And so this new missile that the Russians use on the territory of Ukraine could be a signal of what the Russians have their capabilities of. But it's early to tell, but worrying.
So much happening in the world. Laura Kelly, foreign policy reporter here at The Hill, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
The FBI is investigating whether the break-ins and burglaries of homes of sports stars Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes are part of a transnational crime ring. News Nation's Laura Ingle joins us with the latest on the break-ins.
Drew, our team started reporting on this group of sophisticated criminals back in the spring who appear to be organized through South American gangs, targeting high-end homes and victims. And now that more names are racking up, the race is on to track this band of thieves down before they strike again. It appears this transnational crime ring has become even more brazen, targeting pro football players Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce, breaking into their Kansas City area homes. Now, Mahomes was hit on October 6th, the night before the Kansas City Chiefs had a football game at their home stadium. He would not say publicly if his family was there at the time. Travis Kelce's home, about 15 miles away, was broken into during that home game, but the burglary was not reported until the following morning. Police say $20,000 in cash was stolen. Kelce and his girlfriend Taylor Swift, who was in town for the game, later stayed in a hotel. Most of the homes have alarm systems that are connected to Wi-Fi, and the suspects appear to be jamming the systems before breaking in.
Referring to them as gangs kind of brings up a vision of these street gangs. These are not gangs in that sense. These are more organized rings or cells of thieves that are very highly trained. The more sophisticated some of these groups get, they actually become not easier to find, but easier to tie together because they leave a signature, some type of thing that enables them to either defeat a sophisticated security system or to get into a location or a house in a certain way.
This video showing thieves in hazmat-style suits shows a break-in near Mahomes and Kelce's home that authorities say is related to the other break-ins. The burglary here is worth over $500,000. These are not your typical smash-and-grab style burglaries. Authorities say there are roughly 100 of these 3 to 6 person teams from Chile moving around the U.S., stealing cash, jewelry, safes, and high-end handbags. It's all happening across the country with reported hits in Michigan, Connecticut, Colorado, North Carolina, and California. According to reports, the NFL has now issued a security threat to all of its teams. The FBI is also reportedly investigating. Drew?
Thank you, Laura Ingle. A Florida man is in custody after allegedly plotting to bomb the New York Stock Exchange. That's according to newly unsealed court documents. Harun Abdul Malik Yanir was charged with attempting to use an improvised explosive device to damage or destroy a building used in interstate or foreign commerce. Federal law enforcement started looking into Yanir back in February after getting a tip that he was storing bomb schematics in a Coral Springs storage unit. During the investigation, he told an undercover officer that he wanted to bomb the stock exchange to reboot or reset the U.S. government. The future of U.S. energy appears to be a priority for President-elect Trump and his incoming administration. In today's Political Minute, News Nation chief Washington correspondent and moderator of The Hill, Blake Berman, takes a look at what we can expect.
Trump taps new members of his energy team. I'm Blake Berman, host of The Hill on News Nation. President-elect Donald Trump making energy a key part of his agenda. Trump tapping the fracking CEO Chris Wright as energy secretary and the North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum as the interior secretary. Now, it's the Interior Department that oversees the nation's public lands, wildlife, and natural resources. Trump says Burgum will also lead a newly formed National Energy Council. Trump says that will include all departments and agencies that oversee any piece of the American energy industry. Its goals, for example, include cutting red tape, enhancing private sector investments, and focusing on innovation. The United States right now is the world's largest oil producer for the 6th year in a row. In 2023, the U.S. produced, on average, nearly 13 million barrels of crude oil a day, the U.S. surpassing Russia and Saudi Arabia, the world's other top 2 leading suppliers. I'm Blake Berman, and this is the News Nation Political Minute.
You can find more news and analysis from Blake and our colleagues 24/7 on News Nation. To find News Nation on your screen, go to joinnn.com. That's today's Daily Debrief. I'm Drew Petrimo. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the Hill's YouTube channel. And come back here soon for the intersection between politics and policy.